This is Ivan Slayball from Slayball Family Farms, and today I'd like to talk about our experience with the barber pole worm. We started out with goats, and we had much to learn about the worms, the worm loads, which is the main threat to goats, and of course to the profits of a person that is raising goats. So that's our topic for today. I want to actually mix up some wormer, show you what we do. Okay, so first I would like to show you some of the wormers that we use. So we use the Prohibit, and we also use the Valbazen wormer, and we also have used the Sidectin cattle pour-on with success. This is my go-to wormer right now. There's many different wormers on the market. The Valbazen here, and you can buy this in smaller quantities. Very readily available at farm stores or Jeffers Pet in 500 cc bottles for around $50–$55 maybe. It's pretty expensive. So I'd just like to note that barber pole worm is the main culprit. That's the main worm that you have to watch out for. We've had the white wormers like Valbazen, like Panicure. There's others that they do not touch the barber pole worm. Now we have used Sidectin with limited success at a pretty high dosage. Also an expensive wormer, but this Prohibit wormer has been our go-to for quite a while, and it works. So first I'd like to talk about the barber pole worm and why it is so deadly to goats. Our first experience was bought goats, brought them on our farm, and a very short couple days we had some that weren't doing well. So it is my opinion that most goats will have some worms and some barber pole worms. So what happens is just the way the barber pole worm works. The reason a goat gets sick from barber pole worms is because the worms will attach to the stomach lining, and then they will suck the blood, and what they do is they suck the red blood cells out of the blood. And so when a goat starts to feel sick, it is usually anemic. A goat can have worms and sort of resist them, and maybe not really show that it's sick, and then maybe it gets moved. Sometimes just buying goats and bringing them onto your property all of a sudden stresses that goat just enough till all of a sudden it doesn't feel good, and those worms just get the upper edge, and all of a sudden it seems like there's a event in their life, and it can be kidding. Sometimes goats just having babies, all of a sudden you'll see them immediately after get sick very quick, and you want to know what's going on. There are goats, there's different genetics that can handle worm loads a lot easier. Now there's a big difference between a goat that does not have any worms and a goat that has barber pole worms but is not getting sick from them. Let me just briefly explain the life cycle of the barber pole worm. So what the barber pole worm does, so we'll start at the adult barber pole worm attached to the stomach of the goat. So this is how the barber pole worm feeds itself, and it will lay larvae in the stomach, which will get expelled in the goat pellets. Now this poop is laying in the field, and if it's too dry, the process is slower. But if it's wet, warm and wet, this process starts fairly quickly, and normally within 7 to 10 days. And so these barber pole larvae will start to hatch, and they'll crawl up the blade of a grass. And then if a goat grazes too low to the ground, it will quickly ingest or eat these small barber pole larva worms, and then these go inside their stomach, and the process starts all over. If we have barber pole worms in our goats, we have management issues. What I'm saying is there's management techniques that we can use that will eliminate a lot of the problems that we might have with the barber pole worm. This is what we do. We try to keep our goats moving, and so if we have a paddock where the goats are on, we will move them and not have them on that more than 4 or 5 days. This is what happens a lot. You have a field, you turn your goat out there, and there's plenty of grass out there, but the goat likes to hang around the gate where you bring the water or where you feed him occasionally, and then they'll eat that grass right there. This is where they poop, and then this also, when they get hungry, the first place they eat is the closest place. And so this is something that a lot of goat people that raise goats have just a continuous issue with, is goats, their goats getting barber pole worms and getting anemic. So in short, barber pole worm in the stomach, it lays eggs, the eggs get expelled in the poop, it hatches on the soil, climbs up a stem, the blade of grass, gets eaten, and this is how the cycle continues. Starts at 7 to 14 days, somewhere in there. It really depends on the conditions. Sometimes the goat you'll not, if you have quite a few goats out in a certain paddock, you won't see them all the same. So what we do, there's this little chart that's called the Famacha Test, and we will actually put some of the pictures up here. Also provide a link to where you can research this. I've done a lot of research. You see a goat out there, and one day he's just droopy. He's not doing as well as he was. Another way to identify a goat that is not doing so well is hair coats. If your goats have nice, shiny, slick hair coats, your goat is doing well. If you see a goat that has a rough hair coat, pretty good indication. If that was me, I would start checking those eyelids. So the first thing I do is I'll go and I'll grab that goat, and I'll pull the bottom eyelid down, and I will check the color of the skin. Now, so if the barber pole worm is sucking the red blood cells out of the goat's blood, what you'll see is the membrane underneath their eye will lose its color. It'll become paler and paler. And if you see a goat that's not feeling well, and you check that eyelid, and it's very pale, almost white, then you've got an emergency on your hand. And I will explain on how to bring a goat back from that place as well. So what we'll do next, we're going to mix up some wormer. Now, if you use Valbazen wormer, which is this, the white wormer, is not safe to use on pregnant does. Now what we do is we will mix straight Prohibit wormer. If we have to, we'll use that on pregnant does. However, right after they kid, if we have a goat that is not pregnant, we'll use a mixture of Prohibit and Valbazen. So what I'm going to do, the recommended dosage is 1 pack of Prohibit with 500 cc's of Valbazen mixed together. Or if you want to mix straight Prohibit, we mix it with 500 cc's of water. Now that's a pretty big batch of wormer, and so even on our farm, we only worm as needed. We don't worm all our goats. So the idea is that if you worm all your goats, you'll never kill all the worms. So the idea is that if you only worm as needed, they will not be as resistant to the wormer, and you'll have better success. So what I'm going to do today is mix up a batch of wormer, and this is 52 gram pack. So I'm only going to use half a pack. So what I will do here is so this is 52, and so I'm going for 26 grams. 26 grams of Prohibit into this cup, and we're going to do 26 grams with 250 cc's of Valbazen. I'm at 26.1. Okay, good place to stop. So this is the Prohibit that I'm going to be using. The next step is, this is a goat. It's a baby bottle. I'm just going to shake this really good. So this has a really good date on it. It's good till 2024, and it was cheaper. We used quite a bit of it over time, and so it was cheaper to buy the big bottle than it was spending $54 on a 500cc bottle, but it's expensive no matter how you do it, which is why a lot of people will actually go for something cheaper like Ivamec. So I'm going to turn this the other way. I want to see this side. And I am going, a lot of people have problems with their goats, and so they go to their Tractor Supply or their local farm store, and they'll buy some Ivamec maybe or something else that's smaller bottles, cheaper, trying to save money, and I understand all that, but in the end you need something that works. And so Ivamec does not do the trick. So what we're going to do, we're just going to mix this together, and I am not prepared right now to shake this, but that's the process. 250 cc's of Valbazen mixed with 26 grams, which is half and half of a whole packet of 52 grams and 500 cc's. So that's a batch of wormer. That would be, and this will last a while mixed up. The reason I don't mix up more is I mixed up a whole 500 cc batch here a couple years back, and we had it for a year and a half or something, and it turned colors, and so I had to throw it away. So anyway, that's why I do smaller batches. So I'll mix this up, and I'll shake it when I actually put a cap on it, and I'll shake this up really good, mix it up well. And then the dosage is, this is another thing that's very important. It's important that when you're using Prohibit, that you know the weight of your goat. Now most wormers, you can guess your goat's weights and be pretty good. You can guess them under 20 pounds. And the dosage for this wormer is 6 cc's per 100 pounds. 6 cc's for every 100 pounds of goat. So if you have a goat that's 150 pounds, you're 9 cc's of this wormer. So this wormer is very effective, but it also is hard on the goats if you overdose them at all. So, and I'm not suggesting that you underdose. I'm suggesting that you weigh your goats. One thing, we didn't have a scale at one time, and what I would do is I would take our bathroom scales, I would stand on it, I would get my weight, I would grab the goat, and I'd weigh myself again, I'd do the math. And so if you don't have a scale, but it's just important, there's different ways that you can get the weight of your goat. And if you have a big goat, it's a full-grown goat, and the bigger the goat, the more air you can have and be okay. It's just important that you're close, because it can actually kill the goat. Now, why would you want to use something like that? Because we want to kill the barber pole worms. That's why. So I'm just giving you a process that will work if you follow it. We have followed it successfully, and it's not that hard, but it's important. 6 cc's for 100 pounds of goat, and we do that one time. And if your goat is quite sick, then I will do it again 10 days later. 10 to 12. That's the range that you have. Now back to pasture management. So if you have the opportunity to move your goats, I would recommend, and this is what we do with our larger herd, is we'll have them on a paddock, we'll have them on that paddock for 3 days, and then we move them. Now, and then we keep them off, ideally. Now we haven't been able, we haven't had enough pasture where we haven't been able to always do this, but 40 days. So the idea is that the longer the goats are off the grass, the more of the barber pole worms are dying, because they're not able to go through the cycle. Now 60 days, guaranteed the worms most of them will have died off. And depending on your conditions, will really depend on how long it will take before you can turn your goats back on the pasture and be safe from barber pole worms. So this is called management. This is called pasture management instead of worming your goats all the time. So sooner or later, you'll have a goat and it'll have worms, and you'll look at that bottom inside of the eyelid, and you'll see you have a sick goat. What do? So obviously there's many different things that a goat can be sick from for many different reasons. Bloat, or just even having scours. There's many different things. A lot of the time it will actually be barber pole worms. So, and this is how I check. I go out there, if I see a goat that's not doing well, you know, and this is usually in the spring even, you won't see it so much. The goats there's plenty of good grass, but then towards even in May, June, and July, it starts to worm up, and depending on which part of the country you're in, and then one day you see that you have a goat that's not doing well. You go out and you check that bottom eyelid. If that bottom eyelid is nice and pink, it may or may not have barber pole worms. The other thing then is to, of course, do a fecal, which is actually take some poop and take it to your vet and have them check it for worms, or get your own microscope. There's a lot of goat people that have their own microscope. We haven't done that yet. I would like to do that sometime. We haven't done that yet. There's, of course, different ailments. I'm not saying that the barber pole worm is always the culprit. Frequently it is, more often than you think. And if the bottom eyelid is pale, you can know for sure that you have a worm problem. Now, for that goat, especially if you're already, so there's some goats go down. So if you're new to goats, or if you just haven't seen this before, not unusual that the goat will get sick, and it'll be sicker than you know, and the next thing, one day you'll go out and the goat is not getting up like you think it should. You'll check it and it's a whole lot sicker than you ever would have thought possible. What do? This is what we do. We'll first of all, we'll try to get an estimate of that goat's weight. We'll probably weigh it, and then we will worm it. And if it's pregnant, we will use Prohibit mixed with water. If it's not pregnant, we'll use Prohibit mixed with Valbazen. What the Valbazen does is it will kill a lot of other worms in the body, and it does not touch the barber pole, but it will kill tapeworms, stomach worms, some other worms, and so the two work together very well. Now, so we'll worm it, but then we have what we call a death mix, and I didn't come up with this. There's actually a guy in Texas that I have learned a lot of things from, and his name is Stephen Curtis. He's just put a lot of information out there, and he's the one that taught me about the death mix, and he's got videos of where, you know, he's helped where he'll take in goats that are sick and he'll get them back on their feet. So the death mix, I want to talk about it briefly. And it's a mixture that you give 30 cc's every day for 5 days. I mix it up in a blender, and these are all things that you can get at Jeffers Pets. Syrup, so it's Dyne, Karo Syrup, double dip, keeping on, and what I'll do is I'll mix some molasses in there yet. And then also, we actually use VitaFirm products, and so they have a product that's called Vitalize, and I'll mix some of that in. But the main ingredients that I want to share with you today that you should have is 60 cc's Dyne, 200 cc's Karo Syrup, 4 tablespoons double dip, and 1 tablespoon keeping on. And you mix it together in a blender, and then you give your goat 30 cc's every day. And we've had really good success. It's raw energy. And because frequently when they're sick like that, they won't eat. Sometimes their rumen actually shuts down. So there's quite a few things that are working against you once a goat is anemic. So it's a real challenge to bring them back. But it can be done. We've done it. We've also lost goats that were sick. It can be very challenging. We've lost quite a few goats that got sick before we really learned what we can do or needs to be done. Here's our death mix. This is what we have mixed together, and of course it's just an orange juice bottle that we mixed it together, so it works really good. One more thing that I'd like to note is if your goats are on short grass, the most important thing you can do, of course you have to worm them, you have to make sure that you bring them back into a healthy state, but the more important thing is to even just take them off that grass. Short grass is worse than no grass. The only healthy place for a goat is long grass, 4 inches or more, or on a dry lot. You can usually manage your worms pretty good in those conditions. And the other thing, how do you know that your wormer is working? How do you know that you've actually done the right thing and you've helped your goat? So the only way to be sure is to actually to do what they call a fecal exam, to actually take some poop after 4 days of worming. You take some and you do an egg count. That's how you can know if what you did was working. Now we don't do that. We have found a wormer that does pretty well for us, and if our goats usually turn around and start getting healthy, that's usually we can see in 10 days if we're gaining or not, and that's what we've done. We've had pretty good success. The key is having a wormer that works. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found something that was helpful. If you liked it, please subscribe and share.